This was 2015, and I wasn't really actively looking, but would pop onto the OKC every few weeks to just see if anything interesting was in my inbox. Being female, I had a very active inbox too. And I noticed an email from an interesting, fairly local guy. Email was okay, but it asked about polyamory, which I don't mind talking about if the person is asking it sincerely and is interested and respectful, and we got to chatting, but I had zero romantic or sexual interest, but I thought that this could be a friendship maybe. After a few months of chatting, he found me on Facebook and asked if it was okay to send an ad request, and I agreed. We'd been chatting and getting along pretty well, and he seemed like a nice person. A little weird, but that's okay, I guess, because I'm actually a little bit weird myself. We continued to chat here and there for about 2 years, send birthday greetings, just casual friendship stuff, and he has asked several times to meet and to hang out at this point, and I've considered it, but at the time I was running my own business and working upward of 70 hours a week, plus maintaining my own home, raising my own child, older as an adult, and trying to balance partner and an extremely needy and demanding workaholic client who had no boundaries whatsoever, and there was just so much going on. And so the meetup just never occurred, but we did keep in touch online. Late last year, though, a news story broke about a man and his girlfriend raping and murdering her young teenage daughter. I never connected the name until a friend contacted me and said, "Oh, I see you're friends with so-and-so. Did you see the news?" The news stories all used his legal name, not his nickname. Think kind of Richard versus Dick, which is why I never just connected the two. But it was definitely him. My then online friend of 2 years had beaten, raped, strangled, and then dismembered his girlfriend's teen daughter with the girlfriend's help. He's made several statements since then, stating that he's always had this rape and murder fantasy and that this child was very sexual and that it wasn't fun murdering her as he apparently thought it would be. It still sends chills down my spine though, because I know that I dodged a bullet that day, big time. But be safe out there, because you never know who's on the other side of that keyboard or phone call. And to the dude that I spoke to, I hope that you rot in prison. When I was 12, my parents left for town for a second honeymoon at Niagara Falls. They left my brother, who was 17, in charge of me, and my 10-year-old sister too. A few days after my parents left, my brother told me that my sister was sleeping over at her friend's house and that he was getting drunk and high at his buddy's place. Told me not to set the house on fire or rip off my testicles and that I'd have the house to myself. A few hours after my brother left, my Saint Bernard started barking his head off at the woods by my house. I thought that there was just a bear or a wild dog nearby, and my dog wanted to fight it as he was quite aggressive towards strangers in his territory. I ignored him, but after 30-ish minutes I just got sick of the barking and went downstairs to lock him into the parents' room, but as I went to go into the living room to grab him, I saw a man looking straight at my dog through the glass door, and he was trying to pick the lock open. I freaked out and told him to fuck off, barely managing to wrangle my dog into my room. Called the police and then my parents, and the police came by like 25 minutes later and basically told me that they picked up a guy trying to break into a parked car, and they wanted me to see if this was the guy who tried to break in, as this idiot didn't wear a ski mask for either crimes. Sure enough, it was him, and he also confessed to being the culprit behind other burglaries around town and also ratted out his meth and cooking selling partners. I'm glad that my dog was down there that day, because if he had got in the house and without me knowing, I don't know what would have happened. Either way, I'm sure that this guy is out of prison now and hopefully far away from me. So, I was dating this girl a few months after I started college a few years back. At first, I thought that she was a little strange, because she told me that her father died when she was 12 and she still sees him sometimes. It kind of weirded me out at first, but we got along great and she invited me to come to her home for the week of Thanksgiving. But the first day and night was really normal, and the second night is when it all started. So, I was sitting in her living room on the couch next to the window when I caught someone walk by out of the corner of my eye. I wasn't worried though, because she lived on the main street over town and it easily could have been someone walking by. I casually mentioned that I think I saw someone, and she looked at me and said, "No, that's the side window overlooking the bottom of the hill. The window is about 10 feet off the ground." That did kind of freak me out a bit, but I didn't think too much of it. That night I was laying in her older sister's old room. Her sister was 6 years older than us, so her room was decked out in late 80s and early 90s stuff and whatnot. She had a touch alarm clock on her dresser that cycled from displaying the time, the radio, and the temperature. I was almost asleep too when I saw the clock light up and display the time. I stared at it as it cycled to the radio and started blaring static. And then it cycled to the temperature, and I saw the temperature slowly drop by almost 5 degrees. I was paralyzed with fear at this point, but didn't want to move, and the light on the clock went off, and I just laid in bed trying to rationalize what I just saw. Somehow, I managed to fall to sleep, and the third day began. I brought up what happened to my girlfriend, and she laughed and said that it was probably Dad. She then told me some of the stuff that happens at night, including whistles and footsteps, talking, shadows walking, and the scariest, birds chirping. She had parakeets years ago, apparently, that died, and said sometimes that you'll still hear them. That night we watched a movie, and she fell asleep on the couch, so I went to sleep in her sister's room. I was almost asleep too when I heard, you guessed it, birds chirping. And that night I didn't sleep. To save time, over the next 4 to 6 days there were footsteps, talking, and even the occasional whistle. But it was on night 7 that shit hit the fan. So I was more or less used to the sounds at this point, and it was the last night, so I was not too scared and managed to just fall asleep easily. I woke up at some point though and had to pee, and I went to the bathroom and heard footsteps walk down the hall and stop at the bathroom door. I thought it was my girlfriend or her mum, so I hurried up and finished, and I opened the door and no one was there. I walked back to the bedroom a little confused and turned to look down the hall, and I saw a full shadow standing at the end of the hallway. Well, I booked it into the room, and I laid back in bed and just stared at the doorway all night, but I didn't hear anything else. The next morning I brought it up to my girlfriend, and she laughed and just said, "You met my dad." To this day, that was the one and only and the most terrifying paranormal experience that I've had. So I live in the UK and am a 21-year-old female. I run a B&B and am pretty used to having to make weirdos feel welcome. However, they are mostly harmless at the end of the day. But last week's experiences was by far the worst and most terrifying. It all started on the Monday night of last week. It was the end of summer break, so a lot of tourists were travelling around my area, so it was good business for the B&B. Staying in one of the 7 rooms, I had a foreign couple and their baby. In another room, 2 girls who had travelled from Australia, and in the attic room, I had a lone man who, to be honest, I got bad vibes from at the very beginning of meeting him. He was tall and had long greasy hair and dirty unkempt fingernails, and altogether he just looked very dishevelled. He didn't really talk too much either. He just asked what room he would be staying in and walked in there and shut the door behind him. Still, nothing too out of the ordinary in my opinion. Unfortunately though, it didn't stop there. Now, I spend most of my time in my personal hobby room. I mostly watch TV for a lot of the days and then just go upstairs to my bedroom to go to sleep. I climbed the tall staircase and went to my room, and I checked my alarm clock, and it was only 9:30 p.m, so I thought I might just lie down and watch some videos on my computer. Halfway through watching my favourite movie, I was interrupted by a loud knocking on my door. It wasn't an average knock though, it was really aggressive. I looked through the peephole in the door and was surprised to see that it was the strange man who was staying in the attic bedroom. I opened the door and he started talking straight at me, not letting me get a word in, telling me that the water pipe in his room had burst and that there was water spurting everywhere and that he wanted me to fix it. I obviously apologized to him and, without questioning anything, let him lead me to his attic room. But the first red flag was the fact that he shut the door and locked it behind him. The next thing was that there was no water anywhere. And then I remembered that there were not actually any pipes anywhere in the attic. I don't know how I forgot, but I guess I was more worried about the guy asking for a refund than actually questioning whether he was being legitimate about the whole pipe burst thing. But now, I was stuck, and the only other people who were staying at the B&B were 2 floors below me, so they would never be able to hear me scream. I'm also a woman, so I had no chance of being able to fight off this guy. I looked at him, and he shot me a yellow grin, and he lurched for me, but I leaped out of the way. I noticed something sticking out of his pocket jacket, and it was a knife handle. He pretty much ripped it out of his pocket and started swiping at the air with it. I bolted out of there and heard him running at top speed behind me until we got to the 2nd floor, where I heard him running back up to his room. I locked myself in my room and called the police immediately. I also called the other guests on their landlines and told them to lock their doors and stay in their rooms. When the police arrived, they found the man hiding in the wardrobe in his room. I guess that he freaked out when he heard the sirens and just hid in there. Apparently, he only had one backpack, and it contained a toothbrush, duct tape, a Stanley knife, a Phillips head screwdriver, and some intimate things which I can't even write down, but I'm sure you can guess what I'm talking about. They never found out for sure what he had planned on doing to me, but from the contents of his bag, we all had a pretty good idea. But they took him away in cuffs, and thankfully, I've never seen the guy again. I plan on moving away at some point soon because I just don't really feel comfortable with him knowing where I live. Also, every day I just see that grin that he gave me as he was taken away and his wild eyes. This is definitely the most scary experience that I've ever had.